We have a very unusual topic this morning. You'll see in the bulletin it's listed as 99 years of private lessons. And what that is a reference to the beginning of the public teaching of our founder, Ernest Holmes, when he started speaking in 1918, which, if I count right, means we have a 100-year anniversary next year. And it also relates to the recommended book of the month, Love and Law, which is a series of transcripts of those very first public talks that he ever gave. So it's rather nice. It's like being in a master class with the man himself. There's questions and answers and all of these beautiful little essays, which are the actual public addresses. And I try to keep in mind that he was a very young man when he gave these speeches, and there's a kind of sassiness in it and directness that is really compelling. And he talked about something in these public addresses that was very, very fascinating to him, and it turns out to everybody else as well. Because eventually they came out in the thousands to hear him talk about this topic. Here's a little example of how approachable the language is. One of the questions from the audience: how do I treat for myself? Now, treat means to do an affirmative prayer. How do I give an affirmative prayer for myself? And he says, if you are a beginner, then speak your treatment out aloud in order to avoid intruding thoughts into your own mind that you do not wish or to have a place for, and also to avoid falling asleep. He says, learn to concentrate. Now, he uses the word concentrate in a specific way. It's a type of meditation. He says, learn to concentrate, but not by effort, but by easily bringing back to your mind the particular thought on which you wish to concentrate. So you're to repeatedly bring your attention back to the desired thought. And if you do that, not by effort, you will have accomplished what he's calling concentration before you even know it. Then he says, lack of proper concentration is the cause of all trouble in this life. How about that? And then he says, the something which troubles you is also the same something that makes you well. And the thing that makes you well is the same thing that troubles you. Wow. So never have a sense in your treatment that you are working against anything, for there can be no opposition except in your own thought. So don't struggle against anything in your prayer. Lovely, just lovely stuff. And the thing that he was talking about in these public lectures is basically this treatment. And the way he learned it was by reading another author, somebody he was fascinated with. In fact, he said later that a good 25% of our teaching comes from this author. Some people estimate even more. And the author is Judge Thomas Troward. Judge Thomas Troward was a judge in that part of India that I believe is now called Pakistan. And his hobby was to study the world religions around him, Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, and try to write out a system of how this all worked together. Ernest Holmes found it fascinating, so fascinating that he read every single word that Judge Thomas Troward wrote, and he integrated into his own thinking so that there came times when he was speaking, one couldn't tell if he was speaking Troward or his own words. In fact, if you know your Troward and you read our own textbook, as we call it, there come points where you realize he's just plagiarizing Troward. It's word for word, That's how integrated it was. So what Thomas Troward was talking about in these beautiful writings, well, there were several points that really struck home with Ernest Holmes. One of them being this quality of aliveness in creation, and how the degree of aliveness had a relationship to our freedom and our choice and our ability to move through this world. So as the intelligence increases, so do choice and freedom. For example, a stone compared to a twig, compared to a leaf, compared to a tree, compared to a bird, as the complexity of the aliveness increases, so does the ability of that item increase to choose and to move and to self-determine. And he thought that we human beings were on this trajectory of evolving, waking up our intelligence. And as it expanded and increased, we became more aware of our freedom and our ability to choose and determine our own destiny. And he said the ultimate expression of life would be absolute intelligence, which he called mind. And he said of this mind that it was an infinity. Now, this is very important, because to understand this is to understand our teaching. And infinity, and the thing about an infinity, he said, is that there can be only one. Because if there are two infinities, one is going to have to stop so that the other can begin. That's something to take in. Not only that, wait, there's more. An infinity would have to be present everywhere, all of the time, in its complete form. Absolutely. Wow. Not only that, he said. He said that this infinity, let's call it mind or intelligence or God or the supreme being or the thing itself, he said because of its infinite nature, it cannot be aware of itself in relationship to another, because one would have to stop so that the other could begin. That has tremendous implications for us. The ultimate experiences us as self. You know, we could just stop right there, have the offering and go home. And you know, it's the reason why we are constantly going on and on and on about the importance of what is in our minds. The universe does not experience us as apart or separate. So what is in our minds is taking place in the mind of creation itself, which is why we say my mind is a point of activity within the mind of creation. You know, it brings into question this idea of praying to God or giving thanks to God. The very thought of gratitude and prayer takes place within the mind of God. What moves in my mind is moving in the intelligence of creation. It changes everything. I was talking to an acquaintance, and he was sharing with me that he's currently feeling very disappointed, really mad at a particular politician. Well, now you don't know which one. You don't know. Could be anyone. The point is, my acquaintance was saying that it's been a long time since he felt the sort of feelings that he's feeling, and he says to the point where he thinks it's hatred. And he said, you know what, and I thought about it, I can't believe the extent of it and the things that are running through my mind. And he said, but you know what, I feel like it's appropriate. Well, not if you're a metaphysician. Not if your mind is a point of activity within the mind of creation itself, and that everything that flows through you is consequential. So we got to talk about it and ask the question, what if in that combustion point inside of your own mind and emotions, taking place within the very mind of creation itself, Your feelings of hatred and ill will could result in something harmful and horrible to another individual. Would you be okay with that? I mean, it's why Jesus said, love your enemies. Don't have to agree with them. But what happens in the combustion of your own mentality is consequential. And we would do well to think of what Troward said that was so interesting to our founder. He said, what if there were a better way for you to use your mind and feelings, especially if you know about the infiniteness of mind? And he said we are to use our imagination, use our thoughts, use our minds, our prayer, to create a mental prototype. He called it a mental equivalent. It's like a blueprint. In other words, use your mind to think of what it is that you want instead of focusing on what it is that you don't want. And that's not all. There's more. He also said to make sure that the thing, the outcome that we think upon, that we create a mental equivalent for, think of it as our willingness to receive. He said, think of that thing and be sure that it is good. Because each seed, he said, will bring forth a yield according to its nature. You see, because in the infinite, everywhere presentness of mind, which cannot experience us as separate, when a thought arises in it, it is not rejected or judged or changed or mitigated or rearranged or toned down or improved. It's just what it is. So make sure, he said, that the thing you are conceiving of is good, because each seed will bring forth the yield according to its kind. And he also was certain to say that each one of us have to discover this relationship or this use of mind in our own way and experiment with it and discover the reliability of this idea that each seed brings forth a result according to its own nature. And I was talking to my acquaintance about that, and he said, well, when I said I hate the person, I didn't mean anything by it, and I certainly didn't want anything to come of it. Not if you're a metaphysician. I always want to have a pass. Sometimes I'm just tired of being so holy. Right, don't you? Don't you sometimes just want to get all snarky and let it all out? Oh. But there isn't anywhere to hide from consequence. There is nowhere to go. There is no off switch in consciousness. The mind cannot be put on hold, and now what I'm thinking has a free pass. No, in fact, Ernest talks about it, saying we have to systematically root out all of the suggestions that result in our imprisonment and unhappiness. Here's what else Thomas Troward said that was so important to our founder. He said that in the infiniteness of this mind, in its everywhere presentness, there isn't anything to oppose, nothing to reject, only self. And you know what we call that? Ultimate love. Zero rejection. You know that beautiful song that Chris sang, I'm a child of the universe? Well, actually, That may not be stated strongly enough. I mean, the parent-child relationship, I get it's a metaphor, but it's not close enough. It's closer. It's so much closer. The universe doesn't know me as something apart from itself. Think closer. Much closer. Oh, when a person starts to awaken this thought, things happen. Reverend Ruth reminded me, people often quote that Ernest Holmes said, change your thinking, change your life. More accurately, what he said was, change your thinking and your life will change. There's no force in it. It's what am I changing my mind from? I'm changing my mind from being subject to the world's conditions and effects. My happiness depends on people. My happiness depends on outcomes. My happiness depends on government, on things, all the circumstances which Thomas Trotz called secondary causes. And I start to return my thought to what he calls primary cause, the infinite, absolute one that does not see me as being different from itself. And when I return myself to that, things get still. Oh, but the compelling nature of secondary causes. Like the wedding that's coming. Will there be enough parking? Will there be this? Have I done that? Very soon you can feel the spiraling of details. Now, you don't need a wedding to know that. Life will do it. To the point where my identity can be completely rooted in secondary cause. And I'm anxious, and I'm engaged, and I'm fixing, and I'm swirling. And so to treat myself, to do a spiritual mind treatment, I have to come back and take the time to return and speak in my own mind without force and effort, to the best of my ability, the truth as I understand it about the absolute nature of ultimate intelligence. On page 9, he says, the same mind that is in us is in the universe. The same mind, no different. And we reflect into this mind what we think. However, practically the whole human race is hypnotized because it thinks what somebody else told it to think. It thinks from its physical environment instead of from first cause. Oh my. He said, if you could see your thought and take a picture of it, and also of the conditions of your life, you may see no difference between the two. We cannot make affirmations for 15 minutes a day and then spend the rest of the day, the rest of the 24 hours and 45 minutes denying the things that we have affirmed. Do you see what this is doing? This is taking away from us the idea that there is a magical formula that I can do and say, or get somebody else to do and say, and then I'm freed of any responsibility and I can go ahead and think negatively as much as I like. As long as I get somebody to do that treatment for me. No, it's always on. What did the master teacher say? Pray without ceasing. I think it might have been better said like this. By the way, you're praying without ceasing. Oh dear. My good is not dependent on outer circumstances. I must identify myself with the truth of my being. I must be very careful what I latch onto, and I must discover the truth of my being through observation. And the more intelligently I use my own mind, the more of my own freedom, ability to choose and move, I release into this world. You know, metaphysics will never be useful to the person who does not have the patience to wrestle with their own mind, to examine what is in there. It will never be useful if you don't have the inclination to examine it. Here in the book called The Science of Mind, written later in his life, he gives an example of how we are to talk to ourselves. There's no effort in it. I'm just talking to myself in my own mind. Within me is that which is perfect, that which is complete, that which was never born and can never die, the eternal reality. Within me is peace and power and wholeness and happiness. Not just some power, all the power there is, all the presence that there is, and all the life that there is. It is the living Spirit Almighty, and this one is within me. It is wholeness within me. And it is never weary, it is never tired, it is never confused, it is never crazed, it is never anxious. I added these last parts in. No, it is always in its complete state of peace. Poised, he likes that word. It is always in a state of perfect equilibrium. See, I'm bringing myself back to the thought, and then he says, and we should say this to ourselves, and this is the truth about me, that there is no other self. And as I speak this in my own mind, every image of fear is erased from me, every sense of confusion leaves my thought, and my mind now is free to entertain the truth of my being. See, that is our way. To have right conversations in our own mind because we understand the everywhere present nature of the divine intelligence. I invite you to take a breath in with me and to exhale, letting your eyes close. As we take to heart what our founder talked about from his own passion, that we, without effort or stress, observe our own thinking, just noticing the activity in our mind, how mind arises with questions and refutations and arguments, and we have a friendly relationship with all the thoughts in our mind, not striving to stop it or change it or argue with it. But after a moment, we begin in our own silent voice in our mind to speak as best as we can our understanding of the infinite, that it is everywhere present. It is all that there is. It is endless, unborn, eternal, everywhere present. It's the only thing going on. This is the truth of my being, I tell myself, that where I am, wherever I am, whatever time I find myself being in, I am in the heart of the Infinite One. There is no place I can go where there is less of it present. I tell myself, I am remembering that the very thought I'm thinking right now is taking place within the mind of God, which knows no way of separating itself from infinity. And so I take responsibility for thinking the highest thought I can about my life circumstances, about my family, about my country, peace for all beings. Without stress or coercion, I dwell upon this thought: peace. And though I know there is no one or no thing to give thanks to, gratitude rises up in me naturally. I cannot step away from it. It is as natural to me as breathing, and I feel the thanks for this moment of sanity. And so I let this, my prayer, come to its ending by saying the words, "And so it is." Once again, I invite you to breathe in and to sigh.